This is a dramatized fictional story. Names, locations, and institutions have been changed. Any resemblance to real persons is coincidental. 6:14 a.m. Silence has a sound in an unhappy house. It's the low hum of the furnace and the steady, rhythmic click, click, click of my grandfather's 1950s Hamilton watch as I wind it. I sat on the edge of the bed in the gray Indianapolis dawn. This watch doesn't have a battery. It requires effort to keep time, just like a marriage. But sitting there, I realized I was the only one doing the winding. For 6 years, I'd been the engine for a family that was quietly running me into the ground. I walked to the kitchen, the floorboards groaning under my weight. That's when I saw it. The family iPad on the counter, glowing in the dark. A message from my stepson, Leo, had popped up on the lock screen. A preview short enough to read without touching a thing. It was to his friend Kyle. "Don't worry about the cover charge. The human ATM just deposited the tuition check. Mom says if she just keeps him happy a few more nights, the cash stays unlimited. He's such a sucker." The word sucker echoed in the quiet kitchen. I didn't drop the iPad. I didn't wake Sarah up to scream. In my job as a logistics manager, when a shipment goes missing, you don't yell at the truck. You audit the manifest. You trace the route. You find the point where reality stopped matching the paperwork. I stood there and understood something with a clarity that made my stomach go cold. I wasn't a husband in that message. I wasn't a father. I was a function, a utility, a balance sheet with a pulse. I poured coffee and drank it black, watching the seconds tick by on my Hamilton. Each click sounded steady, indifferent, like the house itself had already accepted the truth. Then I opened my private laptop and started mapping out a route they never saw coming. I remembered our wedding at the VFW hall like it belonged to another man. Sarah in cream lace, smiling like a promise. Leo, 15 back then, calling me dad in front of everyone. I thought I was building something permanent. A home, a legacy. My grandfather used to say a man's word is his bond, but his ledger is his truth. Somewhere along the way, I stopped verifying and started hoping. I told myself that trust was enough. That was my mistake. I pulled up the shared calendar Sarah insisted we use. Leo's biology degree laid out in neat color-coded blocks. Labs, study groups, review sessions. It looked so responsible, it was almost comforting. The kind of schedule that makes a man feel proud while he's working overtime to fund it. But my world runs on tracking. Freight doesn't arrive because you believe in it. It arrives because you can prove where it is. And Leo's car wasn't a mystery to me. The toll transponder was tied to an account I managed. The monthly statements landed in my inbox like clockwork. Another quiet duty I'd taken on without noticing. So I compared the dates. 3 times a week, his toll tag hit the same exit. Not the university, downtown, right near the riverboats. I stared at the screen until the numbers stopped being information and became a pattern. While I was at the freight hub working double shifts, he wasn't sitting in a classroom 40 miles away. He was 40 miles away doing something else with the money I'd been calling tuition. The betrayal didn't come with shouting. It came with symmetry, dates lining up, locations repeating, a lie so consistent it felt rehearsed. Sarah had printed that calendar and taped it to the fridge. She'd sat across from me at dinner, nodding while Leo complained about his heavy course load. She watched me buy the story, bite by bite, and never once flinched. They weren't just spending my money. They were mocking the sacrifice that earned it. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Confrontation was emotion, and emotion was what liars fed on. I saved the logs to a hidden drive and closed the laptop like I was closing a case file. Then I grabbed my coat and my keys and drove to the credit union, because digital suspicion is just noise until it becomes paper. 10:15 a.m. The credit union smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee, the kind of scent that clings to places where people come to borrow time from their future. I stood at the counter, kept my voice steady, and asked for a full transaction history on the education savings account I'd been funding for Leo. Not a summary, not a screenshot. Paper. 12 months. Every movement. The teller, Mrs. Gable, looked at the screen, then up at me. Her face shifted, just slightly, from routine to something careful, something human. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and sent the request through, the printer behind her already warming up like it knew what was coming. The pages slid out in a clean stack. I watched her eyes track the lines as she sorted them, and I could see the moment she understood. When she handed the stack over, she didn't meet my gaze for a second. Every check I'd written with tuition payment in my own careful handwriting had been cashed at a branch located inside the Riverboat Casino complex. For a beat, my body reacted before my mind did. Tight throat, cold hands. Then the logistics part of me took over, the part trained to stay calm when something expensive breaks. I ran my thumb down the columns, date, amount, location, over and over again. More than $22,000 bled out in 6 months, not in one dramatic theft, but in a steady siphon that relied on my trust and my exhaustion. Each check had textbooks, or lab fees, scribbled in the memo line in Leo's sloppy handwriting. It wasn't just fraud, it was theater. He didn't think I'd ever look. He mistook my quiet routine for weakness. "Can I see the signature card?" I asked. Mrs. Gable pulled it up, then printed the authorization page. Leo's name was there, and next to it, Sarah's. Joint access, full withdrawal authority. That's when the betrayal stopped being a suspicion and became a structure. She hadn't been fooled. She'd been part of the mechanism. "I need certified copies of every check," I said, front and back. Mrs. Gable nodded again. No judgment, no lecture, just procedure. I wasn't making a scene. I was gathering the black box data from a wreck. When I walked back to my truck, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Hey, honey, Leo needs $500 for his midterm materials. Can you transfer it now?" Leo didn't even let the coffee finish brewing before he started his pitch. "There's this internship in Chicago, Elias," he said, leaning on urgency like it was a weapon. "Huge opportunity, but the housing deposit is $5,000 up front." Sarah stood behind him at the counter, nodding too fast, her eyes sliding away from mine like they couldn't hold contact and keep the story intact. "It would look so good on his resume, honey," she added, voice soft, practiced, supportive wife tone, the same tone she used when she wanted my logic to step aside. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just listened, watching Leo's mouth form rehearsed sentences, watching Sarah's hands move as if the kitchen itself might distract me from what I knew. My fingers found the crown of my Hamilton watch out of habit, a small grounding touch. All I could see was the printout from the credit union, casino location stamped again and again beside the amounts I'd been calling tuition. In logistics, if a shipment keeps getting delayed, you stop blaming the weather, you start watching the driver. That afternoon, I was moving a pile of school laundry near the mudroom when I felt paper under my palm. A crumpled slip, half hidden like it had tried to crawl away. I unfolded it slowly, already knowing it wouldn't be a syllabus or a bookstore receipt. It was a boutique receipt from downtown, high-end streetwear, glossy logo at the top, the kind of place you walk into to buy a version of yourself. The total was $240, one designer hoodie, one pair of limited edition sneakers. The date matched the day Leo had told me he needed money for biology lab insurance. I stared at the ink until it stopped being numbers and started being a picture. Leo in front of a mirror, adjusting the hoodie, checking the fit, admiring the image my overtime had purchased. The thought didn't just make me angry. It made something in my chest go quiet. Sarah hadn't been oblivious. She'd been a shield. The shopping bags didn't appear by magic. They'd been carried into the house, hidden, tucked away before I got home. She'd missed one receipt, that's all. One small ghost of the truth left behind. At dinner, I didn't confront them. I let Leo talk about his future career, while the receipt sat in my pocket like a hot coal. I watched Sarah smile at the right moments, nod at the right words, keep the performance smooth. I wasn't an investor in this family anymore. I was a witness. The next morning, I went to the post office with a very specific letter in my hand. In American bureaucracy, nothing exists until it's documented. I stood at the post office counter with my letter already sealed and paid for certified mail and a return receipt, the green card. I wanted a signature, a timestamp, something that couldn't be argued away over dinner. The letter was simple, a formal request to the university registrar to verify enrollment for the dependent I'd been subsidizing. No accusations, just a question with a paper trail. The clerk stamped the envelope and handed me my receipt like it was a small piece of reality. When I got home, the house felt tight. Sarah was pacing the kitchen, phone in hand, performing concern. "Leo says you've been distant, Elias," she said. "He's stressed about the internship deposit." It wasn't a question. It was pressure. Soft voice. Hard intent. The move was familiar. Make the person who asks for proof feel like the problem. I watched her eyes for a flicker of guilt and found none. I kept my voice steady. "I'm focused on the numbers," I said. "Busy season at the hub." My Hamilton ticked against my wrist. 3 days later, the green card came back, signed by a clerk at the college. The registrar's reply followed soon after, 1 page on clean letterhead. Leo Vance had not been registered for a single credit hour in the last 2 semesters. No maybe. No mix-up. The checks I'd been writing for tuition had never reached the university. I read the sentence twice, then folded the letter along its creases. The grief was still there, but it had been boxed up and labeled. In its place was clarity. Cold, procedural, undeniable. At the bottom of the page, the date stared back at me. Proof doesn't just end arguments. It starts consequences. The silence in the house was about to become a public record. A logistics manager learns early. If the main route is blocked, you check the secondary paths. You don't guess. You verify. So I went to the county clerk's office and ran a public records search on our household assets. I expected to see the boring comfort of normal, our home, our cars, everything in order. Instead, I found a lien, a title lien filed against Sarah's SUV. 6 months ago, she had taken out a high-interest title loan using the vehicle I paid for as collateral. The payments were already 3 months behind. The document was plain and unemotional, printed in legal language that didn't care why it happened, only that it existed. That was the moment the betrayal changed shape. This wasn't just Leo gambling away my money while Sarah looked the other way. This was Sarah dragging the entire household into the mud to keep his lifestyle afloat. She wasn't managing a difficult son. She was financing a lie with our stability as collateral. I sat in the clerk's office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and toner, and realized I was married to someone I didn't know. A lien isn't a mistake. It's a choice. It's proof that ours only works when both people tell the truth about the mine. I didn't panic. Panic is for people without records. I downloaded the docket and saved it to my private cloud drive. Another piece of the dossier, another weight of paper that no apology could dissolve. On the drive home, I thought about my grandfather's voice. Never buy what you can't see, and never trust someone who hides their debts. Sarah had been coming home later and later, saying she was helping Leo study at the library. Now I heard those words differently. I didn't need a fight. I needed a timeline. I went back to the credit union one more time because data tells you what happened, but a witness tells you how. 3:30 p.m. The sun over Indianapolis was a pale disk, thin and tired behind the winter haze. I returned to the credit union, not to stare at another screen, but to find a person. I waited until Mrs. Gable came back from lunch, the teller who had printed the casino transactions without asking me to explain my life. When she saw me, her expression tightened. Recognition and caution. People who work behind counters learn to read trouble early. I kept my voice calm, professional. "I'm not asking you to speculate," I said. "I'm asking what you remember." I placed a photo on the desk. Sarah. The same face that smiled at me across the dinner table. The same hands that had squeezed mine while Leo asked for more. Mrs. Gable looked at the picture for a long moment, then nodded once, slow and certain. "I remember her," she said. "She was with him. Not every time, but often. She waited near the door." My stomach tightened, but my face stayed still. "There was one day," Mrs. Gable continued, "when the withdrawal limit needed authorization. She came to the window. She said it was for emergency medical equipment for his studies." The words landed like a clean cut. Not rage, something colder. Confirmation. Sarah hadn't been a passive bystander. She hadn't been fooled by Leo. She had stepped forward when the system required an adult voice. She had looked a stranger in the eye and lied to move my money faster. I thanked Mrs. Gable and asked if she could document what she'd just told me, briefly, neutrally, as an internal memo of a customer interaction. She hesitated, then nodded. Procedure mattered to people like her. Paper protected everyone. When I left, the memo sat in my briefcase like a physical weight, a collection of facts heavier than any apology. I drove home and parked across the street for a moment, watching the lights in the windows. The house didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like the scene of a slow, careful theft. 8:44 p.m. I sat in my darkened home office, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. The rest of the house hummed with life. TV laughter, distant footsteps, the soft clink of dishes, like nothing was wrong, like the machine was still running. I took my grandfather's Hamilton watch off my wrist and held it in my palm. The metal was cold, familiar, honest. I wound it slowly. Click, click, click. My grandfather used to say a man who loses his temper has already lost the argument. Anger burns hot and fast, and liars know how to wait it out. So I didn't give them fire. I gave them silence, measured, deliberate, controlled. On the desk, I laid everything out in order: the message, the toll statements, the bank printouts, the boutique receipt, the registrar's letter, the lien docket, the teller's memo. Each piece of paper had a date, a location, a signature. Together, they told the same story from different angles, the way real truth always does. I thought about the wedding at the VFW hall again. Sarah in cream lace, Leo calling me Dad, my own smile wide and naive. I realized I hadn't just been in love with a person. I'd been in love with a narrative, one that never existed outside my head. Sarah had seen a steady, quiet man and mistaken steadiness for stupidity. She thought kindness meant I wouldn't check. She didn't understand that a logistics manager's most important skill isn't moving things forward. It's knowing when to cancel a contract that's bleeding you dry. I packed a small bag with essentials and my grandfather's old photos. I wasn't leaving in a hurry. I was leaving with a plan. The manila envelope sat on my desk, thick with proof, waiting for the right moment. In the living room, Sarah and Leo laughed over a pizza I had paid for. They thought the human ATM was still dispensing. They had no idea the power was about to be cut. I slid the envelope under my arm and walked toward the kitchen table. The dinner table was a stage, and they slipped into their roles the moment I sat down. The envelope rested under my arm, paper that didn't care about feelings. Leo leaned back, turning his wrist so the light caught his designer watch, like he was taking a victory lap. "So, Elias," he said, voice sweet with fake camaraderie, "about that Chicago housing deposit. The landlord needs the $5,000 by tomorrow morning." Sarah reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Warm fingers, warm smile. "It's a big step for him, honey," she said. "Think of it as an investment in our family's future." Investment. Future. Family. Words designed to make a man stop thinking. I looked at her like I was meeting her for the first time. She was still beautiful, but everything about her felt rehearsed. I didn't pull away. I let the cold metal of my Hamilton press into my skin and waited for 2 steady ticks. "An investment," I repeated. Leo's grin flashed. "I have the money," I said. The room brightened for them, like I'd flipped the power back on. "But we'll do it at the credit union," I added. "There's a new security step for large withdrawals. They won't release funds unless all authorized parties are present." They didn't hesitate. Sarah nodded immediately. Leo nodded faster. "Tomorrow," he said. 9 a.m.? 9:03, I confirmed. They thought they were going to collect a check. They didn't realize they were walking into paperwork that would finally tell the truth out loud. Narrated by AI voice technology.